All right, all right. Let's get this party started. All right, we're looking at 8.2, finding sides and angles. Let's see what we can do here. You're going to need your calculator. Okay, you're going to need it doesn't have to be the graphing, it just needs to be the scientific calculator with the sine and cosine and tangent functions. Okay, just a basic calculator will work. Or you can, use the graphing calculator, or you can download one as an app from the App Store, TI-84, or Scientific Calculator, whatever. Okay, so there's a process here for finding side lengths and finding angles. We have to use the trig functions, the trig ratios that we just learned in the last section. So if you need to review back to those or write those down on a card of some sort so you can look at them, whatever. Anyway, when you set it up, you set up finding these sides and angles, you set it up as a ratio or a proportion, and then solve it using, cross multiplication. So that's the general basis, but let's go to example 1. Okay, so you have this angle of 64 degrees. So that's the angle we're going to start from. If I start from that angle, looking directly across to this side x, that is the side opposite. And then this other information, this other side that we have is a value of 25. It's the hypotenuse. So my ratio then from this angle would be opposite and hypotenuse. So the ratio of opposite to hypotenuse, that's opposite over hypotenuse. What ratio is that? That is sine. Okay, so we're going to set up the equation as the sine, use the angle, 64, we'll just go over 1 to make it a fraction, equals the side opposite, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 25. Now we have it set up. Now if we cross multiply, then we'll have, let's see, where am I going? I'll just write it over here. Go this way. If I cross multiply, then sine of 64, okay, do that first, then times that by 25. So on my calculator, let's turn it on here, see if you can see that. Okay, so on my calculator, if I go the sine, and make sure you're in degree mode, 64, okay, I'm going to do that first, enter, times 25. Okay, so my answer is what? 22.469. So I'll round that to, so the other direction is x equals. So I'll round that to 22.469, 22.47. So I'll say this side, x, then is 22.47. Now it's not an angle, so I don't have to use degrees. So that's what we'll do. Okay, let's go to the next one here. Second example. So let's see, here's my angle. So from that angle, I have the side, let's see, opposite, and I have the side adjacent. So the ratio that I have is opposite and adjacent. So that's got to be tangent. So I would say tangent, use the angle, equals the side opposite over the side adjacent. So now I've set up that fraction, or that proportion that I can solve. So if I cross multiply, I'm going to have x times 1 is x. Tangent of 47, I'm going to do that as one group first, then times by 12. Okay, so the tangent of 47, I do that, I times it by 12, I should get 12 12.87. So do that on your calculator. Make sure you get the answer that I get. If not, check and make sure you're in degree mode. Okay, let's go to the next example. So this is my 18-degree angle here. What do I have? I have, from that angle, I have the adjacent side and I have the hypotenuse. So from this angle, this side is adjacent, this side is a hypotenuse. So adjacent hypotenuse, what function is that? That's cosine. So I'm going to say cosine of 18, because that's the angle that I'm using, 18 in degrees. And the side opposite, the ratio or the fraction over the hypotenuse. Now I cross multiply, so x times 1 is x, and the cosine of 18 times 34. So I do the cosine of 18, enter, then times 34, enter, and you get, let's see, that should be right close to 32.34. That's the side length. So, yeah, I'm usually just rounding to the second decimal place. So I look at the third decimal place and round to the second decimal place, or the hundredths place. Okay, what do we got here? I've got this angle. So this side I have opposite and I have adjacent. So that would be 10. Whoa. All right, never mind, we'll back it up. So from this angle, 35 degrees, I have the side opposite and I have the side adjacent. So opposite and adjacent. Opposite over adjacent is tangent. So I'm going to say tangent of the angle 35 is going to equal side opposite over the side adjacent. So now if I cross multiply, I'm going to have 9 times 1 is 9. Tangent of 35 times x. So I'm going to say x times the tangent of 35. So this is a number. And if you do that on your calculator, you get some number. So to solve for x, we would just divide by that number. But I won't calculate it until we're done with the process here. So tangent of 35. Okay? So now x is going to equal 9 divided by the tangent of 35. So on my calculator, see what that looks like. I'm going to go 9 divided by, now make a parenthesis, tangent 35, close the 35, close the tangent of 35. So now it's 9 divided by that whole group of tangent of 35, and that's going to be 12.85, yeah, 12.85. Okay, so when we get going with these, you're either going to be multiplying the trig function times the side, or you're going to be dividing, depending on what you're solving for. Let's see what the next one is. But in all cases, you just start with the angle and just set up the ratio. So from this angle, I have the side opposite and the hypotenuse. Opposite, hypotenuse. That would be sine. So I would write sine 63 equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cross multiply. 1 times 27 is 27 equals sine of 63 times x. So I'm going to write x and then put the whole sine of 63 in parentheses. Divide off the whole quantity, sine of 63. So it's 27 divided by the sine of 63. So do it like we did the last one. And x is going to equal, you should get 30.3. All right, let's try it again. So 30 is referring to this one. So this angle will be 60, but we'll just go from here. 30-degree angle, so I have the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. So that's cosine. Adjacent, which is 18, over hypotenuse. Now we can cross multiply. So 18 will equal, so 18 will have x times the cosine of 30. So just like the last one, we'll divide by the cosine of 30. So that reduces to 1x, and then this is cosine 30. So 18 divided by the cosine of 30, that should give us about 20.79. Okay, all right, that's those finding side lengths. Now finding angles, we're going to have to use the calculator a little more here. But let's see, let's get this situated. All right, we're going to use what we call the inverse ratio, or inverse of the ratio. Sine, we're going to use the inverse sine. Cosine, we're going to use inverse sine. Tangent, we'll use inverse tangent to find the angle. So what you know is if we're going to, this angle represents a ratio of two sides, okay? So if you know the ratio but don't know the angle, you can do the inverse of the ratio and equal the angle. For example, if I know the ratio, I can do the inverse. Sine is what? Opposite over hypotenuse. If I do the inverse on my calculator, that's going to equal the angle. So for example, if I had well, we'll go to the examples, but cosine, we'll just write down their inverses. If you look at your calculator, if you do the second function sine, you'll see sine to the negative 1 power. Second function cosine, you'll see cosine to the negative 1 power. Second function tangent, you'll see tangent to the negative 1 power. So that's where you're going to find this. So the cosine, if we did the inverse of the cosine, that would be the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. That's going to equal my angle. And the inverse tangent of some side opposite over adjacent, that's going to equal the angle. So on the notes, if you're looking at my answer key, I had written to the negative 1 of the x. X is representing the ratio, so that's why I put that there, would equal the angle, and so on. And tangent. Anyway, here's how this works, okay? So in the first example, see, we don't know this angle, okay? But we know this side is opposite that angle, and this side is adjacent that angle. So opposite and adjacent is tangent. So if we said this, tangent of the angle equals 8 over 14. Okay, now coming back here to this example here, the 8 over 14 is my ratio. So that's going to go here. So I need to rewrite this and say the inverse tangent of the ratio, or the fraction, is going to equal my angle, and that's what I want to find. So this is how we do this on the calculator. So whatever calculator you have, okay, you're going to want to do, what, inverse tangent? So here's the tangent button, okay? If I do second tangent, the little blue is tangent to the negative 1. So inverse tangent, and you can see that it says tangent to the negative 1. Then I just type in the fraction that I had, which was 8 over 14, or 8 divided by 14. And I close that, and then I hit enter, and there's my angle. 29 point, let's say, ooh, the other 4 gets rounded, so let's go 7.5. So 29.75 degrees, because that's the angle. So we'd write the little degrees symbol. Okay? So that's how you use the calculator with those. All right, so let's, we'll do one more example, and then I need to outline a few steps. Or we'll see. All right, let's go this angle. here, this side, what are the sides that we have? We have the hypotenuse and we have the side adjacent. So adjacent and hypotenuse, that would be cosine. So I'd write down cosine. So I'm going to kind of go the long way here. I'm just going to write it out. Cosine of the angle, it would equal 38 over 40. Now I write the inverse of the fraction is going to equal the angle. Then I go to my calculator. Second cosine, cosine -1. Okay. Fraction is 38 over 40. Enter. Angle is 18.2. Yeah, 948. So that rounds. Okay, so 18.2 degrees. Okay, that's what the angle equals. Okay. All right. Let's outline over here under finding angle measures. If you look in the key, I had outlined some steps. Okay, so I'm going to go through those steps. First of all, here, we need to define the ratio. That means, is it sine, cosine, or tangent? So you have to find the angle that you're starting from. Okay, find the angle that you're starting from. Like here, we started from this angle, because we were looking for that angle. Okay, define the ratio. So that means, oh, what do I have? I have these two sides. So what is the relationship of those two sides to this angle? Well, this is opposite, this is adjacent. So I defined it by saying, oh, opposite over adjacent is tangent. Okay, so that's how I defined the ratio. I have to decide, is it sine, cosine, or tangent? That's the first thing we need to do. Then you set up the proportion. That's step 2. Set up your proportion. So, like here, we did, if you can skip ahead and go right to the inverse, that's fine, but set up your proportion. So, tangent of the angle, we don't know what the angle is, it's going to equal the ratio 8 over 14. Okay, that's setting up the proportion. Then you would rewrite as the inverse. So we would use the inverse function. So that's what we did here. So then from here we set up the inverse. So we said, okay, the inverse tangent of the ratio equals the angle. So these two kind of swap positions. Okay? And then we do this on the calculator. Last step, calculate. Make sure you're in degree mode on your calculator. And then you'll have your answer. Okay, so those are the steps. Backing up a little bit, let's go through some steps here, just finding the side lengths. This is a little quicker. Okay, our first step is you find what angle that you're using. So in this first example, we find this angle. Okay, there it is. Then we define what ratio we have from that angle. So what do we have from this angle of 64? We had the side opposite and the side hypotenuse. So we defined the ratio. We said, oh, okay, that's sine. So you define your ratio. And then we set up the proportion. Cross multiply to make it the equation and solve. So as the steps, we find the ratio. From the angle, we define the ratio. Set up the equation. Okay, we set up the equation. Cross multiply, and we solve that over here. We cross multiplied and solved. Now, as we learned later in some of these examples, after we cross multiply, we might have to divide to find x. Okay, but it's still the same process. We found the angle, found the ratio that started from that angle, sine, cosine, or tangent, then we set up the proportion, and then you solve by cross multiply. And you may have to cross multiply and be done, or cross multiply and then divide and be done. Okay, those are the steps. All right, and you can look at the key, or you can, pause and rewind this video, however you want to do it to hear this enough so that it sticks for you. All right, let's see here. Next example. So we're still finding angle measures because the angle is missing. Okay, so that's how we would know. If on your test, it just says solve or find the missing parts, and you see, oh, I don't have an angle, then you would assume you'd find the angle. All right, let's see here. So this angle is sitting right here. The two sides from that angle, I have the side opposite and I have the side hypotenuse. So that's going to be sine. So the next step says set up the proportion or define the ratio. Okay, it's sine. So I'm going to write down sine of my angle that I don't know, 17/22. So I've set up the ratio. Now I have to use the inverse. So I'm going to write sine inverse 17/22 equals the angle. And then I take my calculator and I type it in. Let's see. Sine. So I hit, hold on. So I hit second sine. And what was the ratio? It was 17/22. 17, honestly, 17 divided by 22. All right, that looks right, okay. And 50.599, so 50.6. So that's 50, so the angle equals 50.6 degrees. And don't forget the little symbol because this is an actual angle, so you have to use that notation. All right, let's see here. All right, last one. Here's my angle. What do I have? I have the hypotenuse and I have adjacent. Well, that's cosine. So I have defined the ratio. First step. Cosine of my angle equals 11/48. Or adjacent over hypotenuse. Set up the inverse. Inverse cosine of the ratio equals the angle. Calculator. Second cosine, 11 divided by 48, enter. My angle is, you should get 76.75 degrees. Excuse me. All right. I'm going to pause that video and make another one for page 7.